Karen Jobs' scathing speech, The End of the Friendzone Economy. Karen Jobs stood at the podium in front of a packed conference hall filled with nervous HR directors, corporate diversity officers, and the so-called boss babes, the professional women who had built their careers not just on competence but on the careful manipulation of male validation. She took a deep breath, a wicked smirk curling on her lips, and leaned forward. "Well, ladies, it's over." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Karen silenced them with a raised hand. "I know what you're all thinking. I can see it in your eyes. That tight little panic setting in. Because deep down, you always knew this day would come. The day when the so-called simps, the men who built this world, the men who carried the weight of civilization on their backs while you dangled the promise of sex and validation in front of them like a golden carrot, walked away. And now, you're left standing here, wondering what the hell happened." She laughed, cold and venomous. "Let me spell it out for you. For years, you ran the game. You took a simple truth that men are motivated by sex and validation, and you turned it into an economy. You convinced an entire gender that if they just worked hard enough, climbed high enough, kissed enough ass, and, most importantly, stroked your egos enough, they might just be deemed worthy. And you built an empire on it." She gestured toward the massive corporate banners hanging overhead, remnants of a system designed not for efficiency, but for ego management. The hiring practices? A joke. The diversity initiatives? A sham. You weren't hiring the best, you were hiring the men who entertained you. The ones who made you feel important. The ones who kept the office fun. The ones who were just pathetic enough to need your approval, but not so pathetic that they couldn't be useful. You rewarded their subservience with fake promotions, meaningless job titles, and the constant, nagging hope that maybe, just maybe, you'd reward them in ways that actually mattered. She slammed a fist on the podium. And it worked. My God, it worked. You filled your offices with men who would do anything just to be in your presence. And you kept the ones you didn't find attractive busy with mindless, ego-stroking, make-work jobs. Filing reports that didn't need to be filed. Sitting through meetings that didn't need to happen. Chasing down compliance tasks that didn't matter. Every one of them hoping that if they played the game long enough, they might just be chosen. The friend zone wasn't just a dating strategy. It was an entire economic system. She let that hang in the air. But now? She grinned, savoring their discomfort. Kevin Coder broke your system. He handed the men the one thing you never wanted them to have, an alternative. He gave them purpose outside of you. He gave them a way to build, to create, to thrive without needing you to approve it. No more friend zone promotions. No more simping for scraps. No more pretending to laugh at your jokes in board meetings just to keep their jobs. She let out a slow, mocking sigh. And here's the real kicker, ladies, they don't miss you. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. That's right. You thought they'd come crawling back, didn't you? You thought once they realized they weren't getting their validation fix, they'd break. That they'd come running back to their office cubicles, ready to play along. But they didn't. Because the truth is, once a man realizes he never needed your approval in the first place, he's free. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And freedom is the one thing you could never compete with. She stood up straight, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve. So go ahead. Scramble. Panic. Try to figure out how to lure them back. Try to find new ways to guilt them, to shame them, to manipulate them back into their little hamster wheels. But it won't work. Because the men you built this system on? They're done. They're out. And they're not looking back. She turned on her heel, walking off the stage as a stunned silence filled the hall. The friend zone economy was over. The world was being built again, not for women's egos, but for men's purpose. Throughout history, men were willing to do whatever job it takes in order to get sexual access. And this made perfect sense in that a man should be expected to prove himself before giving the opportunity to propagate the species. That is until men got a good reason for taking the easy way out with the sexual revolution of the 1960s. Politicians, who are overwhelmingly nothing but stir-crazy lawyers with delusions of grandeur, shipped off the poor boys to Vietnam, a country they'd never heard of, in order to be crucified, while their rich boy counterparts used their wealth and family connections to get student exemptions from this crucifixion, in order to get all the sex and drugs and rock and roll in the Jesus costumes that their parents bought them, all under the ruse of giving peace a chance. Continue with Karen Jobs' speech with the information included in this paragraph, and be as scathing and venomous as possible. And what did those rich boys do once they'd secured their free pass from crucifixion? Did they use their intelligence, their privilege, their so-called higher education to build something? To create? To protect? No. They used it to steal. To cheat. To convince the world that the ones who actually bled and suffered, the ones who actually broke their backs for civilization, were the problem. That the real enemy wasn't the politician who sent the poor to die, or the corporate jackals who shipped their jobs overseas, but the very men who built the world. And so they waged their revolution, not against tyranny, but against the builders. Against the backbone of civilization itself. Against men who worked and fought and bled, calling them oppressors while they lounged in their dorm rooms, sucking down drugs, stuffing their faces, and writing the free pass of their daddy's name into cushy jobs where they'd never have to lift a finger beyond signing the next pink slip. And then came the final insult. They didn't just take the jobs. They took the sex. Because what good is a cushy existence if you don't have a harem to validate you? They got women to believe that the man with calloused hands, the man who built the roads and lifted the steel and plowed the fields, was a dinosaur, obsolete, unfashionable, undesirable. Instead, they sold them on the dream of the sensitive artist, the free spirit, the slack-jawed poet who recited plagiarized garbage between bong hits and called it enlightenment. And the women ate it up. Because why mate with the man who actually built the house, when you could spread your legs for the leech who lounges inside it and calls himself a philosopher? And so the deal was made. The grunts would keep working, keep sweating, keep keeping the lights on. But their reward was gone. No family, no love, no legacy. Just a tax bill to subsidize the lives of their replacements. And when the builders finally started to notice, finally started to say, hey, wait a minute, why am I killing myself for nothing? They were told to shut up. Called failures. Losers. Inkels. Told that they deserved nothing because they weren't funny enough, confident enough, charming enough to entertain the very women who now thought themselves queens. Well, guess what, ladies? The game is up. The simps are out. And the economy you built on their backs is crumbling. Because the men you mocked, the men you ignored, the men you thought would just keep playing along, have found a better way. They don't need you anymore. They don't need to sit in your offices pushing meaningless papers while stroking your egos. They don't need to debase themselves, to play the fool, to dance for scraps of attention. They have something better. Something real. They're building. And when they're done, they won't be coming back. The free ride is over. The friend zone is bankrupt. And you, my dear boss babes, are about to find out just how much of your success was built on the very backs you so eagerly spat on.